Go. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. We're back here at Valley Forge, at the Valley Forge Beef and Ale, our great patrons for the afternoon. And we are all part of the great Agorist Unconference. 75 wonderful speakers across 3 days, and we had our 5 speakers here this afternoon. It has been enlightening, it's been fun, it's been entertaining, and I got a beer out of the deal. The perks are wonderful. We do have to thank one last time before we introduce our last speaker, our very, very kind sponsors, and they include freekeen.com, and I've been corrected, KEENE.com, freekeen.com, the Foundation for a Free Society, the libertyvoice.com, the Freedom Engineering Project, the Global Net of Anarchy and Peace, Fully Informed Jury Association, Center for a Stateless Society, PorkFest, Edgar the Exploiter, WeUseCoins.com, Doxing for Congress, Del Val Silver, the Montgomery County Libertarian Party, Truth, Freedom, and Prosperity.org, and LarkenRose.com. Nice lineup of people that wouldn't have happened without it. What we're going to do now is a little bit different. We're going to have Larken Rose come back up here. And for those of you who are just joining us right now, let me just go briefly that Larken Rose is our self-described and often described tax heretic and enemy of the state, author of numerous books, 4 books I'm being told right now, and I probably couldn't tell you, yes I could, How to Be a Successful Tyrant, The Iron Web, Most Dangerous Superstition, and what's the 4th?
Kicking the Dragon.
Kicking the Dragon. I should have remembered that. And also he has his email list with thousands of subscribers, and he's a good news. What we're going to be doing is Larken is going to be conducting open discussion. So he's going to come up here and he's going to take over control of the stage for as long as we let him. We're anarchists, right? We'll stop him. Some of you are anarchists. I'm a libertarian. What can I say? And if you have a question, you can do what we've been doing. Just say it from the audience. But if your question, to quote Larken, is more than 5 words long, we're going to ask you to come up here on the stage and stand here alongside of Larken. This is for the benefit of the people in the home audience. And that way you can do a little back and forth. And we can get into something a little bit behind the scenes, a little bit into the philosophy of what's going on. All right, you with me? And you people on the web, feel free to keep sending in your questions. And Anak, I'm glad you're happy that your question got asked. I was paying attention. I thought it was going to get lost in the sauce there. Any questions? Any answers? Besides 42. Hearing none, let me welcome back up to the stage the unique Larken Rose. I'll take my beer.
Okay, this is going to be sort of free-for-all anarchy. There are directions I can take it in, but I want to see if any of you want to take it in a direction or scream at me or call me on anything. So, anybody want to cause trouble?
I have more of a commentary, and maybe just like to bring out the salient points about this philosophy of owning oneself. If you look around in society, in our current day society.
Wait, you're over 5 words. You should probably come up here.
I was just thinking about this during the break. Hey now, hi. I was thinking during the break that there are many examples of people that are living in America today. A lot of them are in communities, for example, that I really think have shown to the world we do own ourselves. We want to do things our own way. We don't want to be involved in the illusion of the government that's supposed to have authority over us. For example, people who are part of particular religious organizations, the Church of the Latter-day Saints groups, Quakers, and what I've noticed is lately you might see them in the media, and they said, we know, thinking of the polygamous family that's on television, Sister Wives, maybe you've seen it. I watched it out of curiosity, and what I noticed was they have a unique lifestyle. This is their belief system. It's absolutely separate from the United States government view of what marriage should be, what family should look like. but that's their belief system. They want to keep it intact, and they decided that they wanted to put this on television. Well, they've actually recently come under some scrutiny for their belief system, and they said, we realize that our lifestyle is completely different from many of yours, but this is how we want to live. We want to be left alone. And we know that it's risky. But I think it's admirable, whatever your opinion of them is your opinion. But I think it's admirable that they have the courage to live their lifestyle the way they see fit. They don't see themselves as slaves of their system. And I mean, I don't really know what their economic situations are in terms of, if they pay taxes, if they avoid them. I don't know what their mode is in terms of the financial aspect. But I do think that there are enclaves. That's just one example. There are enclaves of people that are visible that have said, no, I don't wish to participate. I believe I own myself, and we would like to live separate and from the normal mode or the perceived authority, under the perceived authority that the government grants you. So I also think of homeless people. There are, I don't know the numbers. There's tens of thousands of homeless people in this country. They get there through very different means. But I think it's interesting to ponder that people who don't have income and they live from day to day for survival, they're also very free. Not advocating homelessness. I think it's better to be productive and to try to provide for oneself and have a good quality of life and have safety, which I don't think that a lot of homeless do. But I think it's interesting if we stop and think that there's a lot of different ways that people are trying to, or maybe they, out of circumstances, are living separate from the tyranny of the government. But I think it's great that you've written the books that you've written. I applaud your work. And I think we do need to talk to each other one-on-one, step by step, and it may take a lifetime to come to the realization that we do own ourselves.
Thank you very much. That actually brought to mind a couple things. One is, for the homeless thing, I have to mention, I have a brother who lives in a tent in the woods. And we know lots of people, and they say, oh, you can stay with us. He chooses to live in a tent in the woods. And he's very productive. He has a job. He's a musician, very good musician, way better than me, which annoys me. And it's a very different lifestyle, and he chooses that. And in a way, he is so much freer than the people who have mortgages and credit card bills. He's the richest homeless person I know. And I tell him that all the time. And there are plenty of people who say, you can stay here. And he said, I do this by choice because of the freedom it gives me. And it's hilarious to me, and we often joke about it, it's against the law to live in a tent. Now, good luck authorities finding him. It's against the law to live permanently in a thing that politicians haven't said you're allowed to live permanently in, even if it's on your own property. You don't have that's not zoned residential, or you don't have an occupancy permit. Well, bite me. It's my property. I can live in the tent if I want. And the fact that almost everybody chooses the conformist way is sort of depressing, but there are these examples like what you were talking about, where people are saying, we do things this way. And they usually are open about saying, you don't have to do it this way. You don't have to approve of us doing it this way. We don't ask that you condone this or like this. You can even go out there and say, I think polygamy is horrible, or I think this is horrible, or that's horrible, or gay marriage is horrible. You can say whatever you want. Just leave us alone. And really, the concept of peaceful coexistence, everybody says we want peaceful coexistence. Nobody who believes in government wants peaceful coexistence. Because what government is about is they're going to take your money to pay for whatever those voters want it for. Whether it's war that I oppose, or the war on drugs that I oppose, or wealth redistribution that I oppose. just the basic concept of you don't have to like me, you don't have to like my choices, you don't have to like what I do. If I don't attack you, leave me alone. That's just being a human being. And that very simple concept completely rules out government. Government is utterly incompatible with peaceful coexistence. Because peaceful coexistence is always leave people alone if they leave you alone, and government is always don't leave anybody alone.
Right.
Force them to obey the standard set of rules and to pay to have the ruling class stomping on them. So yeah, it is nice when we see examples of people saying, no, we're gonna do what we believe. And of course the media and the government always have to portray them as wackos and kooks and occasionally exterminate a few, like the Branch Davidians down in Waco, which was just heinously evil on more levels than I can count. Well, you're sort of weird, and they use the you're sort of weird angle to kill almost 100 people, including babies and little old ladies, because they broke the law, which means, yeah, they weren't hurting anybody, they weren't threatening anybody, they were living differently and they had different beliefs. But they allegedly possessed a piece of metal that the politicians said they weren't allowed to possess. So in comes the Gestapo, and eventually 80-some of them died. And that is government. Peaceful coexistence is the exact opposite. Anybody else want to dive in? Yep.
Well, I was going to say that I've often thought that when some group of government passes a law, that the penalty is always the death penalty potentially.
Yes.
And I've often wondered what would happen if I went into my local borough council and asked them when they were considering legislation, well, are you prepared to kill me if I don't comply?
Yeah, the comment is about, it's a statement that it's fun to say because people go, what? You're insane. Every law is backed by the death penalty. And he was saying, it'd be fun to go into borough council and say, you're going to kill me if I don't comply with this. And invariably, they'd say, no, of course not. No, what? Are you insane? Okay, so I don't pay, then what do you do? Well, then we send you nasty letters for a while and say, now you have to give us more. Okay, I still don't pay, then what do you do? Well, we send you more nasty letters. I still don't pay. Well, we come to take your house. I don't leave. We make you leave. How? We send men with guns. I don't come out, and I have a gun. Oh, then we kill you. It always comes down to that. And that's the problem we're up against, is government is the opposite of rationality. It's the opposite of compromise. You know, if you and I have a disagreement about something, where the property line is or who owns that cow or something, we are at least capable of saying, well, I'm not too happy with this, but we'll say it's there just to let bygones be bygones and coexist peacefully. Government doesn't do that. They say, you do what we want, or we keep sending more and more men with guns until you do what we want, or until you're dead, which is close enough. And so the whole notion of getting along and peaceful coexistence is the exact opposite of government. Government is aggression to whatever level it takes to make you bow or die. And that's always what it is, even though it makes people really uncomfortable when they hear it put that way. Because no, they wouldn't do that. Well, if you keep resisting, you'll see exactly what they will do.
I would say that they have no choice. They have to do that, because if the moment they back down, they erode their own legitimacy in a sense, or the legitimacy that they fancy that they have.
Right. He was saying they have to do that for what they are, because if they said, you better, never mind, everyone will go, oh, cool, so we can just disobey you. They're like any bully. They have to escalate it, no matter how stupid and trivial the disagreement actually is. They have to escalate it until the person bows or dies. Because if at any point government says, well, never mind, we're not going to collect this tax, we're not going to enforce that law, there goes their legitimacy, and everybody goes, oh, cool. In fact, one example of that is alcohol prohibition, where it got to where they couldn't enforce it. Juries were saying not guilty, even when the people were obviously guilty, and revenuers were being tarred and feathered, literally. The people wouldn't put up with that stupid injustice, and the government figured out, we're going to repeal it. Because to have a law on the books that we can't do a thing to enforce makes their legitimacy fall apart. So they take it back and pretend it was their idea. But yeah, if they ever don't escalate things to deadly force, they're finished, which is why that's what they do. That's all they do. It's the only thing they do well is using violence against people. And they do it all the time. They have lots of practice. But yeah, every law is that. They're not suggestions. They're not requests. They're you will do this or we'll kill you. It's a very pro-civilization entity that we're taught is necessary for humanity, a ruling class that says, here's a list of things you do or we kill you. Great. That sounds very civilized. Anybody else want to dive in?
But they are filled with goodness and great wisdom.
Goodness and great wisdom. Exactly. And one of the funniest things to me is how many people say, we need a ruling class. Yeah, they're corrupt and they're stupid and they do bad things and they waste our money and they spend our money on things we don't like. And so they have this, everybody can think of a nice big long list of things the government does wrong, but we really need them because otherwise it would be chaos. And if you ask them, well, they're just people, right? Well, yeah, they're just people. Are they as decent as everybody else? No, they're a bunch of crooked, corrupt liars. Okay, so we all need to be controlled forcibly by a bunch of crooked, corrupt liars in order to make us behave properly. And that is the foundation of the belief in government. Because nobody thinks people in government are actually virtuous and good and wise. At least not anymore. Now everybody can see they're stupid and corrupt and insane. And they still cling to the idea, but we need them there. There would be chaos and destruction if these stupid, corrupt, insane people weren't threatening us with violence all the time. That's the foundation of what's taught as civics. And it's utterly loony. The fact that everybody believes it doesn't make it any less loony, it just makes it harder to question.
But Larken, why do you hate America?
That actually brings up a good thing. He asked, why do you hate America? Asked flippantly. I know that troublemaker. People mush together in their heads, society, like a bunch of individuals, and like, I love my country. When people say that, I say, that's nice. What is your country? Is it the place? Is it the government? Because, ew, I don't love that. Parasite class. Is it some vague principle that once upon a time was supposed to be the foundation, like individual liberty? Like that has anything to do with what the United States government is about. What do you even mean when you say you love your country? And most people, they feel this profound patriotism, like I did. I really love my country. Just didn't have any idea what it was. I love freedom. I like the place pretty much. A lot of it's pretty cool. Been to all 48 of the states other than Alaska and Hawaii. Been to all of them. My dad was a teacher. We drive around in summers. It's a cool place. Pretty many cool people there. I kind of like some of the principles that started it. But if you step right across the line into Canada, I don't suddenly hate it. I don't know what it is I'm supposed to be attached to when people say, you're not patriotic, you don't love your country enough. And people really don't like it when they have this profound attachment to their love of country, and I say, I'm sorry, but the only way you can rationally define that is you love the people who are on the same slave plantation as you. You love the slave owners that own you, because that's the only thing that defines the line. You step into Canada or Mexico or go somewhere else, the only difference is a different group of psychos claim the right to rule it. Why do you love that? I love my plantation. Don't. Love humanity. Love freedom. And it doesn't matter where the lines are, and it doesn't matter what the politicians say. Love a principle, not a place, not a ruling class, not a plantation. Anybody else? I have stuff I can throw in, but anybody who wants to have to say.
Semantics are often like the way the state controls us. For example, people associate anarchy, which just means without rulers, as chaos and death and destruction. And that's why we use new terms like agorism, voluntarism, to try and better express what we're getting across. Can you speak to better expressing the message and using language to our advantage and not the language that they define?
Yeah, he's talking about how semantics are used by the control freaks Most people call them government, I call them the control freaks, because that's what they are. How they use semantics and terminology to basically demonize freedom. And a big example is anarchy. It means no ruling class. It also means chaos and mayhem. And how convenient for them that the same word is used to mean both. In other words, if you're free, you'll all kill each other. That's the implied message that they don't even have to say. It's built into the language as it's used. And so there are a lot of other terms like voluntarist, which is a lot more pleasant sounding. Mostly people haven't heard of it and they go, what's that? And you say, I want everyone to interact voluntarily. And everyone says, oh, cool, me too. None of them mean it because they haven't thought about the fact that what they do by way of their political ideas is advocate aggression against everyone they've ever met and everyone they haven't. So voluntarism is a nice term for it. There's a reason I use anarchism pretty often, which is voluntarism is more specific, and in some ways it's more accurate. There's a reason that I still use the term anarchist and anarchism, because I find that often, no matter how nicely and politely you lead people to the concept of a voluntary society, eventually they get to, you mean no government? And they freak out. So I just skip all that and make them freak out in the first sentence. Yes, I mean no government. And then get into why no government A is the only moral choice and B is the only choice. Because government isn't real. You can either be deluded and hallucinate a magical entity called government, which you hope will fix society and will always make things worse, or you can accept that every person owns himself and live your life accordingly. And I know some people would rather do it politely and use the less scary sounding terms. And, you know, if that works on people, outstanding. I prefer the bludgeoning over the head.
For all its faults, government does do things. So some of it is always laudable. For example, the government is spending $2.2 trillion on the welfare state. Now there's a problem. The problem that they're solving is seniors eating dog food, $20,000 prescription bills, and things like that. If you're going to get rid of the state, you should have some suggestion of what you're going to replace it with. So what are you going to do for these thousands of seniors who are depending upon you and everything like that? How do you sell that?
Okay, the question is, all these things the government does, allegedly useful, like taking care of poor people and all that. The question is, without the state, what are you going to do for those people? And there's a very specific reason my answer is absolutely nothing. I am going to do nothing about that. And I usually follow that up by, we have been trained to think in terms of a centralized, authoritarian, forcibly imposed solution to everything. What about the poor? You say the poor, you mean however many million people who are down on their luck, right now including me. And so people think in terms of what gigantic centralized solution will deal with the poor.
I never said that.
No, but the question of what do you do when the state disappears implies that I'm going to give a centralized answer because I don't really have the money.
I don't want a centralized answer. I want a real answer.
The real answer is, notice how you worded it, which is how everybody words it. What are you going to do? Which is why the first part of my answer is nothing. If I'm really rich, I might help a few people I know. The question is, when people ask me that, is I say, well, what are you going to do? Because you have just as much power as I do. And if 100 million or 300 million people thought, well, what am I going to do? Because if each one of them helps somebody, it's a lot easier than having one guy try to stand up and say, here's my solution to solve poverty for the world. But that doesn't fit into the template of the way most people think. Most people think, I want to hear your plan, which means a government plan. And you didn't say government plan.
Correct. So what's your plan? Nothing.
There's nothing. Absolutely nothing.
See what seniors eating dog food.
That's the implication that comes from a statist point of view. And I know you're sort of don't want to be nasty, do you?
Go for it.
The statist point of view.
I can stand up.
The statist point of view, and I wish I remembered it. There's a great Lysander Spooner quote about when the collectivists, they confuse society with the state and say, when we say we don't want the state doing something, they think we don't want anybody doing it.
Right.
Like if you don't want the state feeding the poor, you must want the poor to starve. And it really, the authoritarians have a huge advantage because they can propose violent, centralized solutions. We're going to forcibly rob the rich and give it to the poor. I can't do that because I don't own you. I can't force you to do, I don't have the right to force you to do anything. All I can do is say, look back at history and see which works better. These great forcibly imposed centralized solutions, like, wow, the Soviet Union really helped the poor. Look how many of them it made.
Straw man.
Or just say, I'm not going to fix the problem. If there's somebody I know, I might fix that tiny little problem. No one person is going to fix the problem because no one person possibly can have the ability to fix the problem.
I disagree.
And the way to fix the problem is freedom.
I agree. So I think I should be up there with you.
Yeah, come on up here. Come on up here.
95 years.
Over 5 words, yeah.
Yes.
Are you over 5 beers?
No, this is still my first beer that Jim got for me. Good man. There's a problem out there. Now, big secret, don't tell anybody this, I actually sold insurance for a little while. And there are people who have $20,000 bills for prescription drugs.
Mhm.
They're looking for help. Right or wrong, they turn to the government for that help. Now, if you want to sell no government, you have to come up with a replacement for that. Now, you've already said you personally are going to do nothing. That's okay. You know, I'm a libertarian. Your life, your way, as far as I'm concerned. But I disagree with your statement that one person can't do anything. You go
Oh,
tell
not anything. Can't fix the whole problem.
Can't fix the whole problem. I disagree with that. Go tell Rosa Parks one person can't fix something. What I'm looking for an answer. What can we take to people to say, this is going to solve your problem? And just by saying, I'm going to do nothing, or one person can't do anything, if one person can come up with a new system, not a Soviet system, not a forcing system, but an open system, one where you can choose to participate or not, how can you say that doesn't exist?
What I would say is to propose a solution, like in a free society, you can say, I have an idea for feeding the poor, it goes like this.
Yes.
But guess what? Nobody has to pay attention to you.
Yes.
A million people might say, that's a great idea, let's do that. That's a million individuals saying, I could help this problem, including the one who says, here's my idea.
So we agree.
On that, yeah.
Okay.
But the idea that you could guarantee that, you can't. You can say, I have this great idea. If nobody follows it, it's not going to do anything.
I'm not using the word guarantee.
Right. But what people want from statist solutions, despite the fact that they never work, is a guarantee.
I never offered a stated solution.
I know. I'm not saying you.
You're not arguing with me. Somebody else should be up there. He's talking to somebody else.
I want to, well, when you're done answering him, I want to ask Ken a question.
Okay, then you can come here and beat him up. The statist solution, the statists pretend to have guarantees. Not you. I'm not saying what you said.
Thank you.
So that when you say, you have to replace this with something, no, I don't. I don't have to give a guarantee of anything because nobody can give a guarantee of anything. I can say, we might do it this way. I can say, we might do it this way, and you can say, we might do it that way. The problem is, if you step away from the principle, which is they don't have the right to rule, and get into the field of, here's how you're going to be taken care of without them, I think you've already given up what actually matters, which is the moral issue. And I'm unabashedly nasty to people who receive stolen property, no matter how poor they are. I say, you don't have a right to have my money stolen from you.
I agree.
I hope you're taken care of
I agree.
if they don't. But you don't deserve to have a guarantee that you will be taken care of before you stop accepting my stolen money.
I agree with everything you're saying. What I want to know is, how's it going to work after we stop stealing from people?
Well, that's the thing, is we can give suggestions and we can give predictions of how it will work. But what people want, when most people ask that, maybe not when you asked it, when most people ask that, they mean, what guarantee can you give me that I will be taken care of? And the answer is none. It's called reality. There is no magical system that will guarantee that you'll be taken care of, that the planet won't be destroyed by a meteor, that we won't be invaded by Martians. Go down the list of all the nasty things that can go wrong. There is no guarantee. there are lots of ideas that are completely outside of the political realm of how human beings can interact and deal with the
I
problems.
never mentioned guarantees.
I know,
So why are you arguing guarantees?
because that's what people want
I'm
when they
not
say
people.
replace this.
I'm Ken.
You're not people.
Ken, what are you doing to prevent old people from eating dog food?
I was just at the Maryland Libertarian Party convention 2 weeks ago, and I spent an hour and a half answering that question. I spent 25 minutes doing the presentation, and when I said any questions, every hand in the room went up. So I'm not going to steal Larkin's time. I just wanted to put him in the position
I want to be your.
where most anarchists stand. I agree with them when they say that government is forced. I agree with them when they say that when he says that they shouldn't be putting people in cages. I agree with 99.99% of what the man is saying. What I don't see is what he's suggesting instead. And if I could be a little flip about it, if we did what you're suggesting, we'd have anarchy.
I have a question.
Well, wait a minute, get in line.
Wait, yeah,
Well,
Peter.
I just wanted to, yeah, the discussion that you two are having is a discussion that I've participated in, but it usually doesn't go very far. And so I really want to get it to go farther in the future, maybe now, but so if you were asking me the question, Ken, that you asked to Larken a minute ago, typically what I've come up with is the first answer is, well, I have some ideas, but what do you think? And try to engage in a discussion, because I don't think there is one answer. I think what you're trying to do is, we need, if we want to sell the free society, we have to sell it with something.
That's right.
And-
If you're
and-
not going to have seniors eating
No,
dog food,
dude.
how are you going to do it? Right now you're saying, somehow. Oh, Jim will take care of that. Just like Jim bought me my beer. Thank you, Jim. I'm out, by the way.
I'm feeding old people.
Internet question.
All right.
Internet question. From George Donald.
Oh, a voluntarist.
Yes, I dismissed it.
Don't.
Give me just a second.
Well, let Peter jump in there then.
Peter, you should come up
George
here.
Donald.
I'm just thinking,
All
right, go ahead.
George Donnelly. Ken, how can government solve problems it itself creates and refuses to acknowledge?
I have no idea. I'm not part of the government. My question had nothing to do with government. Question is, if government is not creating and solving problems, how do some of those problems will still exist, because not all of them are created by government. Like I said, when I was selling insurance, I ran into this poor woman. She's spending $20,000 a year on medications. Some of them are psychoactive medications, so I'm not sure who would want to run around without them. If I'm running for office, what am I going to tell her? If he's trying to sell his anarchy, what's he going to tell her? He's already said, too bad, honey, you're on your own. I don't accept that. And I think George has changed the subject by saying, well, what would government do? That's not my question.
Here's my slightly mean analogy. When you say, if government isn't doing these things, what will you replace it with? I think,
Well, how would the problem get solved?
how will the problem get solved?
It's not getting solved now.
I don't want this to sound mean, but that is exactly equivalent to saying, if there's no such thing as Santa Claus, how do we make sure all the kids get toys?
But there's an answer for that question.
The answer is, there's no such thing as Santa Claus,
Sure there
whether
is.
or not the kids get toys.
Santa Claus is a gestalt human being. He's made up of all of us, and we participate as Santa Claus as much or as little as we want.
Yeah, and
That's
it's
the same
little,
thing
maybe
that
they
what
won't
we-
get it.
That's right, and that's the same thing that we need with society.
But you can't replace a mythical entity with anything. All you can do is get that it's mythical and then act like human beings to deal with it.
You're changing the subject again. I don't care if it's mythical or not. I want to know what your solution is. And right now you say you don't have a solution.
There's not a solution to Santa Claus. Like, I don't have to describe how every kid is going to get a toy
I rest
in order
my
to
case.
demonstrate that Santa Claus isn't real. Government isn't real, whether
You're
or
right.
not
You're right.
before it get taken.
Like I said, I agree with you 99.9%. I want to know what comes next. All right? We've agreed. Everybody wakes up one morning and says, government should be gone. Okay, Larken.
Not it should be gone, it never
All right.
was.
It never
There's
was.
a difference.
And people realize that, and now,
Now we act like human beings. And
Now
see
we
what
have-
happens.
okay, it's my answer. We don't know. We'll
We
see.
don't know.
We'll see. For an answer, to give you an answer, a longer answer, you should read my forthcoming book called Atlas Snubbed. It's a parody of Atlas Shrugged, and it has my solution in it.
My only point is, whatever you're doing, that's exactly what would happen without a government.
Exactly,
So,
and that's my
you have
point.
your answer.
I knew that I had my answer. I would
And if
see
your
it.
answer was nothing, then nothing would get done.
No, something will get done, but that's something else. All right, I got my answer. Thank you, sir.
Okay.
And thank you for being here.
If we were to abolish carjacking, what would be your solution for carjacking?
Yeah, we need some sort of system where the carjackers would be given cars that were, in proportion to how much they need. Yeah, exactly. You don't replace violence with anything. You don't replace Santa Claus with anything. If people live like people, like we own ourselves, I don't know what will happen. I couldn't possibly predict. I couldn't possibly suggest. Neither could anybody else in the world. I might have some dumb little ideas. It's a safe bet that a million other people will have better ideas than mine. The thing is, what's the foundation you're starting from? Is the foundation you're starting from, how will we have Santa Claus solve this, or how do we as human beings solve it? If you start from how do we as human beings solve it, you're in really good shape. If you look to a mythical entity called government to solve it, you're doomed. And the thing that people want, not saying Ken wants it, but what people are so used to hearing and so much want is to hear a centralized plan that will take care of the poor. It will protect us from foreign invaders. It will do this. It will do that. It will do the other thing. And what they don't want to accept is there's no such entity. If you're not going to do it yourself and all your neighbors aren't going to do it, it's not going to happen. It's called reality. There is no guarantee. There is no magical power that will come along and save us all from reality.
That brings me into the subject that I want to get into. They're basically looking for a political savior.
Yeah.
So could you talk a little bit about, people's religious beliefs as far as, I think personally that Romans 13 is one of the most misinterpreted chapters of the Bible, and a lot of people use it to give authority to government. Could you touch on that and the whole myth of political savior?
Yeah, there's a million different things I could say about it. I guess the capitalist thing to say is buy my book, The Most Dangerous Superstition. Because one, I'd say the belief in government is a religious belief. I used to think it was analogous to one, and then until I realized it's a religious belief. It's a belief in a superhuman deity with superhuman virtues, superhuman powers that has the right to dictate to us mere mortals how we must behave. That's a God. Now, it also happens to be the dumbest God ever, because at least if you believe in a spiritual thing, you can say, well, it created the universe and it issued these commands. But if you point at government, it's only people. How did they become divine? Well, they had meetings and they wrote on pieces of paper. It's a religion, and the least rational religion of all. And if you look at what God people actually pray to solve the problems in their lives, it's called government. And they pray in the voting booths, and they pray by calling their congressman, please save me from reality. There are these bad things happening. I want you, oh divine congressman, to magically show up and come up with some solution so reality doesn't apply to us. You might as well bow to a volcano god. Makes exactly as much sense, except there might actually be a volcano god. Whereas the members of Congress, just a bunch of crooks. But the other point about religious beliefs that I bring up is that what almost everybody calls their religion is empty window dressing. And it offends people when I say that, which is why I say it. Because the God they really believe in is government. Because if their God says, thou shalt not steal, and government says, pay your fair share, guess which one they pick? When their God says, thou shalt not murder, and government says, whoop, draft time, you have to go kill whoever we tell you to, guess which one they obey and honor? Because they really and truly believe. You can logically demonstrate that they really and truly believe that the God called government outranks the God of their religion. And so they just throw out the windows the teachings and the morals that come from whatever religion it is. It doesn't matter if it's Christianity or Buddhism or anything else. People who believe in government basically throw their own religion in the trash and then bow to the state. And it's really sad to watch, because you have people who are Christians and say, I love my neighbor, and well, except for that neighbor who I want to be robbed, and that neighbor who I want to be thrown in prison because he smokes pot. And that, Turn the other cheek, that's not really compatible with advocate violence against everyone you know. They don't really match. And advocate violence against everyone you know is what believers in government do.
Nuke them.
Nuke them. Right. Love thy neighbor and nuke thy neighbor.
Nuke the brown ones.
Nuke the brown ones, exactly. Let's go kill brown people overseas because we're so loving. And it's sad that they don't even recognize that they are constantly betraying their own morality, their own religion, their own values, their own ethics, because they really and truly believe that the entity called government, first of all, that it exists, and second of all, that it has an exemption from morality. It's allowed to steal. It's called taxes and law, so it's okay. It's allowed to murder. It's called war and national defense, so it's okay. It's allowed to do things that human beings have no right to do, but it's above us. We bow to it, we pray to it, we ask it to shower its blessings on us, and heck with the little religious things we say we believe in, they don't really matter because we want state saving us from reality. I have no idea what our time is doing.
I suggest a semantic change in
Alrighty.
your book.
He suggests a semantic change.
I say that government exists, but the right to rule does not.
Okay. He's saying,
You evil guy, what's your answer to my suggestion?
without the right to rule, it isn't government. And the book gets into that early on, that the concept of government implies legitimacy. When we call the crooks in D.C. government and we don't call the local carjacker and thugs and mafia government, what's the difference? It's that Congress is imagined to have the right to do it. And wherever you dig down to get a definition, a specific definition of government, it always hinges on the notion that their commands are legitimate, that their rule, that they have legitimacy behind their forcible control of everyone. Because without that, nobody calls them government. Nobody calls the carjacker government. Nobody calls the street gang government. They only call them government if they imagine them to have the right to use force. And then you can see it in the way they talk about it. Their demands are taxes. Their commands are laws. It's legislation. We have lawmakers and government and authority and law enforcers. We don't use any of those terms when it comes to a gang beating people up and stealing their money, because those terms imply legitimacy. They imply the right to rule. And that's why there is no such thing as government, because there is no right to rule. The gang is real, but to call it government is to acknowledge its legitimacy and to acknowledge its authority and acknowledge its right to forcibly control everybody else.
Aren't you more or less saying that, I guess to simplify it, the rules of morality that we all obey, people in blue suits and fancy suits, they apply to them too, and to stop obeying a different set of ethics than we obey? Because most people already live a libertarian lifestyle, so nobody uses force against each other. So all we're pointing out is that, hey, for this handful of people, why don't you just live like the rest of us?
Yeah, exactly. I'm going to paraphrase what he said. Basically, the way most of us live in our daily lives is libertarian. We don't rob people, we don't beat people up. Some people do. Most of us treat each other with respect. We don't initiate violence. We don't use aggression against other people. And yes, all I'm saying is the same morality that applies to us applies to the guy with the badge. He doesn't have any rights to do anything that you don't have the right to do. If you don't have the right to forcibly pull someone over because they don't have a sticker on their car, neither does he. If you don't have a right to kick down someone's door and drag him away and put him in a cage for smoking a leaf, neither does he. They're human beings, but they really and truly don't believe themselves to be human beings. Neither the lawmakers nor the law enforcers. They believe they have an exemption from morality. Yeah, if they just accepted that, hey, Mr. Congressman, Mr. Cop, morality that applies to me, it applies to you. If they understood that, just that, government's gone. Because now we're all actually equal, and we all have to follow our own conscience. And you can't say, well, I have a badge, and I have a law, and I have magical authority, so I'm allowed to do things you're not allowed to do. No, you're not. You're just insane. You're a person, I'm a person. What I'm allowed to do, you're allowed to do. It's even. You can't tax me, you can't regulate me, you can't use aggression against me in any way, and I don't care what pieces of paper you have or decrees from whoever that says you have the right. You don't. Just acknowledge you're a human being and live accordingly.
Web question.
Web question.
Off the web from Michael. Mr. Larken, what do you think is the most powerful act we can perform to dismantle the government?
What government?
What government? The question is, what's the most powerful act we can perform to dismantle the government? And actually, the flippant response of Jim over here, what government really is the answer? Stop believing in what isn't real. And then the second step is get other people to see that it isn't real. Because as long as we look at the dot and think that it is what needs to be changed, we're doomed. It doesn't need to be changed. Our perception of it is what needs to be changed. When that changes, the dot won't even matter.
Are you
No, go ahead.
Are you suggesting that the most powerful act that we can perform is to get our heads straight?
Yes, the most powerful act we can perform is to get our heads straight, because that is the obstacle to freedom. It isn't the crooks in D.C.
Question. I definitely can get on board with this idea, but I also want to ponder the thought of, isn't it worthwhile effort to try to restore the Constitution as it was intended for the United States, in that the idea in its perfect form might have been a good way of governing the country, or the United States of America, to form a more perfect union, etc. So I think that maybe that, I think that I personally could cling to that idea in the hope that if only we could bring about this more perfect union idea, because it's obviously not what exists in the country at all, maybe then it would be a good government.
I'll try to paraphrase the question. Basically, wouldn't there be, you can throw something at me if I mischaracterize it. Wouldn't there be some value in trying to get back to the Constitution, the more perfect union,
Right.
and that whole concept? No.
Okay.
And here's why I say that. There is no such thing as limited government any more than there is limited slavery. If my master says, I have the right to enslave you, but only for a half hour a day, and I can't tell you what to say, and I have to let you be armed, and there's all these limitations on how I can control you, the seed of the insanity called authority is still there. The Constitution was absolutely doomed from the beginning to grow into what we have. Because as soon as the slave master is a slave master, even if his powers are really tiny and he has this big long list of restrictions, I'm not allowed to whip you with a whip any bigger than this, I can only work you a half hour a day, he's still your master. Which means he's gonna say the next day, I can whip you harder, I can whip you longer, I can work you longer, and guess what? I outrank you, there's nothing you can do about it. That's why the seed of authority is the entire problem. Now, personally, if we rewound back to the Constitution, I would love it because it wouldn't affect me enough to bother whining about it as it does right now. But we would get back here, because as long as there is that seed of the belief in a ruling class, however limited, however much we pretend it was supposed to be a servant, it's going to get here, because that is not the same as saying we own ourselves. It's saying we want a really, 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 really nice master, and that's not good enough.
It seems like just about every government solution, in quotes, has a free market alternative, especially with technology. There's technology that will just come up and replace things. The one thing that keeps coming up, I think, that people bring up is, well, what about defense? What about defending the country? And I think you can always throw a free market alternative to the post office, to whatever, Federal Reserve or whatever. But they have this really hard time of thinking, well, what's going to defend us? So I know there are free market solutions to that, but that's such a big mental block for people. How do you get them to see that everyone's not out to kill you?
Right. Yeah, the question is basically, like, defense is one of the biggest things used by people who say, well, we have to have government because otherwise, how would this be hit? In this case, the question is defense. And some people say, well, how will the roads be built? That's a favorite one. But what about the roads? Like, I'll sit around wishing there was a road if not for government. And you can go down the list of things that people have trouble imagining will be done without it. Now, there's two sides. First of all, there's a lot of really good academic explanations of free market solutions, including to national defense. Personally, I think a completely disorganized armed citizenry would be way better than what we have.
Yeah.
And you could actually organize while you're at it. But if you have 100 million private gun owners, which we do, good luck anyone who wants to invade us. And if we organize, then they're even more doomed. But there's a reason I don't usually get into, here is how it will work. Because if the discussion moves to that, and it's a perfectly valid discussion, it's a perfectly valid concern and topic to discuss, but I usually drag it back to the principle of, wait, are you saying that you have the right to force me, and I know you're not saying this, you have the right to force me to pay for your military solution because you're not quite sure how it would work or whether it would work if you didn't. Because that's not good enough. Because if that's the precedent, we're allowed to violently rob each other because we're not really sure how things will work otherwise, then we're doomed. We're all enslaved. We're going to crash into tyranny as fast as we possibly can. It's really a completely separate discussion. Is there such thing as a legitimate ruling class? No. After that is, okay, well, then what do we do about this, that, and the other thing? Which is a perfectly reasonable discussion and a useful discussion. But if people are hanging on to statism and hanging on to the belief in the ruling class, saying, if you can't describe for me a complete solution that I can believe in, I'm hanging on to believing in the ruling class, that's not okay. That's not a good enough excuse. And that's why I usually focus on the discussion. Yes, that's a question to be dealt with, whether it's taking care of the poor or national defense or anything else. But starting with the premise, how did somebody get the right to rob me in order to protect me? How did you delegate to them a right you don't have? How did they get the right to initiate violence against me and you for this solution? And don't tell me because I'm not sure how things would work otherwise. And that's what most people believe. And governments constantly emphasize that if we leave you in freedom, there will be bloody mayhem. And then people are scared. Okay, we got to keep the anarchy. Exactly. Because then people go, okay, we'll stick with being on the plantation, because golly gee, living free sure looks scary. And teaching them that you own yourself, the slave owner doesn't own you. Yeah, there might be unknowns and scary things and bad things that happen in the world, but you still own yourself. And the question of how we as human beings deal with problems is completely independent of whether we own ourselves. And if we can get past that and start acting like thinking human beings instead of, oh, nanny state, please save us from this, I think most of these problems will quickly become trivial. But as long as we think running to authoritarian and control freaks to solve the world's problems, as long as we do that, what we're going to do is get more and more of the problems because that's the source of their power. They don't want to end war. And the sad part is people think a big standing government military is the only thing that can protect us from being oppressed. Actually, it is the only thing that can oppress us because it's the only thing that the American people imagine to have the right to oppress us. If the Chinese army came and tried to do to us what the U.S. Congress did, there wouldn't be a Chinese army anymore. Sweet. All right, so there's the red symbol telling me to shut up, so I will, because I do as I'm told.
Yes, of course, Larken, thank you very much. Round of applause for Larken. This is fun, a lot more fun than I thought it was going to be. Not just Larken, but our whole list of speakers. This brings an end to this afternoon's unconference. I would like to thank our speakers one more time, starting with Steve Sheets, who's still here, Karen Emery, who is gone, Jim Babb, of course, Mike Salvi, Larken Rose, and I'd also like to give a hearty thanks to George Donnelly, without whose help, assistance, and vision, something like this would never happen, and for Jim Babb, who made it happen here in Valley Forge. Until next time, I remain Ken Krawchuk. Thank you for your attention. I declare this over.